But yeah, welcome. My name is Evan Richards, and I work with the Brown School Professional Development team here at Washington University. And I want to thank you for joining us here today for our Open Classroom series. Open Classroom is the Brown School's virtual and free professional development series for those of you who haven't joined us before. Beyond Open Classroom, we're also the largest provider of continuing education units in Missouri, and we offer year-round workshops on a nearly weekly basis. So if you're looking for CEs or just want some deeper learning, I invite you to check out our website and our offerings. There's a link in the chat and a QR code here. Some housekeeping things before we get going, just so you know. We are using a Zoom webinar format, which means we cannot see or hear you, but we do want you to engage with us through the chat. So feel free to comment or ask questions. And at the end of the presentation, there'll be time for a Q&A. Finally, we will be recording today's session and posting that recording on our Open Classroom page. So a link to that is also in the chat. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. So Kelly Zelenka has been in the nonprofit, government, and philanthropic sectors for 25 plus years, serving in senior leadership roles and on boards. Her experience spans multiple social impact areas, including housing, economic development, child welfare, mental health, education, disability, and aging. Her consulting practice focuses on individual and team leadership development, board capacity building, managing change and improving culture, operational assessment, and strategic planning. Kelly has a degree in applied psychology and certifications in executive leadership, interim executive leadership, and succession planning. Cheryl Adelstein has 35 plus years of experience in local government, nonprofit management, and higher education. Her specialty areas include community and government relations, advocacy, nonprofit operations, and board relations. She has served in deputy director and interim executive roles. Her consulting practice includes executive search, financing, accounting, and fundraising operations. Cheryl is a third sector company certified succession planner and certified interim executive. So now, without further ado, I'll turn it over to Kelly.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Evan, and thank you to the Washington University's Brown School for hosting this topic today. And a shout out and a thank you to Third Sector Company, who's very generous about sharing their materials and is the organization that Cheryl and I have been associated with to receive certifications in succession planning. We're really happy to see so many people are interested in this topic. And it looks like from a lot of folks from St. Louis, but also from elsewhere around the country. So thank you for joining us. Our topic today is leadership continuity in nonprofits. And I think folks on this call know that nonprofits provide a wide range of services to meet the needs of people in our community every day, from the basics of healthy food and stable housing to art, theater, culture, and faith traditions. And because nonprofits are so important to the fabric of our communities, succession planning or leadership continuity planning in one nonprofit can impact the entire community. We're excited to bring this information to you today because Cheryl and I have both worked extensively in the nonprofit sector and understand its profound impact, and we're very invested in the health of the sector. So succession planning, this session is about leadership continuity, but succession planning is the approach used to ensure leadership continuity at all levels of your organization, from board to executive to senior leaders and staff who may one day want to advance to leadership positions. You want leadership continuity at all levels of your organization, and succession planning is a way to achieve that. So I'd like you to think just for a second, if you can go back to the other slide, Cheryl. What do you think when you hear the term succession planning? It could be new leader or change, anxiety, or opportunity. It can be so many things that you think about, so many reactions that you have, because we all have different experience of succession planning. Some of those experiences are positive, others are difficult or even painful. So today we're going to walk through an introduction to this comprehensive succession planning approach and share information about what your organization can do to help ensure leadership continuity planning by doing good succession planning. Next slide, Cheryl. So I wanted to start by offering some information about the current nonprofit landscape. When we look at recent data, we see that only about 29% of nonprofits have a written plan or policy to guide what happens when a leader leaves. For example, your executive director leaves expectedly or unexpectedly. This is an even lower percentage for nonprofits with budgets of 1 million or other. Then it's less than 29% of the nonprofits that have, with a $1 million budget, have a succession plan. And you can see how quickly this becomes a very widespread issue. There's really been not a lot of groundwork laid in many nonprofits in what can be a very uncertain time when a leader leaves the organization. 80% of nonprofits don't have a retention strategy. So there might be people qualified or even willing to become qualified to advance to that next role in leadership, but the organization has to actively work to retain talented people for that to happen. So retaining high quality staff interested in leadership positions is one way to temporarily or permanently fill a vacant leadership role. We also see that only 13% of nonprofits have board succession policies. You know that nonprofits are required to have a board and specific roles filled, like chair, secretary, and treasurer. And if there's not a plan to cultivate board leadership, it can impact the legal standing of your organization and or the perception in the community or the perception with funders if your board is not full and robust. So boards are not just required, but they serve a vital function of connecting the organization to the broader community. They provide high-level expertise and guidance. They do fundraising. They're vocal ambassadors for the issues that you care about. So having members who are willing to step into the chair and other officer positions is essential for a robust board. We also see that 38% of people in nonprofit feel that their career has stalled. And this is important as we think about retention strategies as a contributor to leadership continuity, because there's often internal talent that can be supported and people often want to stay, but they might not feel incentivized to do so. They might not see the opportunity within their organization to continue to advance. And lastly, the nonprofit sector ranks third in employee dissatisfaction. Number 1 and 2 are government and healthcare. It might seem odd to be talking about employee satisfaction levels, but leadership continuity can have a big impact on why people choose to stay in an organization and what makes them feel valued and satisfied. So having leaders that are trusted and respected is just one way to improve employee satisfaction. We're going to go into the details of how to do some of this in a minute, but first I want to make sure that we have a common understanding of succession planning. So when one organization is unsuccessful at succession planning, the entire community can really feel the impact in the lack or potential loss of those services. That can be a ripple effect. So I mentioned a variety of ways that nonprofits serve our communities. Imagine losing the expert leadership of those organizations, which, if it's not planned for, can be a risk. This is why we think succession planning is so important. For every organization that doesn't have a succession planning, it adds a little crack, right? A little fragility to the community and to the sector. So let's briefly touch on some terms so that we are all using a common language as we go forward in talking about this. A lot of people think of a succession plan being about how the organization will handle a vacancy in the top leadership position. I like to suggest that a more accurate term for this is transition planning, where the goal is to establish a structured pathway from one leader to the next leader, and where the focus is on that position. Clearly, that's a critical piece of fostering leadership continuity, but it's only one piece. There's another piece, which is career planning. The goal here is to help individuals grow their professional skills and build loyalty to the organization. And of course, the focus here is on the person. So this is about developing people. This involves understanding what's important to a staff member about their role, what appeals to them about their nonprofit work or that organization specifically. finding out what they hope to accomplish in the position they're in, where they see themselves in 5 years. So understanding how the person's goals align with the organization's goals can help us pursue professional development that benefits both the organization and the individual. And when we offer someone this kind of support, they're more likely to stay longer. This development can help people be ready to step into more challenging roles if needed. And as they advance through their careers, the entire community comes out ahead. Even if they leave your organization, but they stay in the nonprofit sector, you've taught them some valuable, given them valuable opportunities as well. So career planning is focused on the individual person. It's a great way to build their professional capacity. Transition planning is focused on a position and filling vacancies when they happen. These are two very different activities, but both are required to build a strong culture of succession planning, which is our third component. Succession planning, which applies to the entire organization rather than to a specific position or person. And the goal of succession planning is stability of the organization and its ability to meet the mission. So the work of succession planning isn't just about when the executive director leaves, even though that's often the time it comes to light, but it's an ongoing process for strengthening the entire organization. It's about the stewardship of people resources to sustain advancement of the cause. Next slide, Cheryl. It's also good to be clear on what is the plan and what is planning. So succession planning is the process, and we should think about it as an ongoing process that continues to build and strengthen as we add pieces to it. It will need to be refreshed over time as you go through the years, as staff change, as your programs change, etc. The succession plan is the policies that come out of the process that are agreed upon and the actions that are taken as a result of going through that process. So this is what you agree to do to strengthen the organization's leadership at all levels. The other thing that we think is really important to point out is that it can be a very emotional process, all of this. And I'm sure many of you have experienced turnover in senior leadership positions in your organization, including the executive director or board members or directors, managers, etc. It can be very emotional for everyone involved, not just those who are moving on from the position, but others in the organization as well, even community members. So if the organization is going through, for example, a founding executive director transition or a very long-term executive director or very long-term senior staff transition, it can be more complex because that person's personality or that founder's personality is often intertwined with the organization and how it's perceived in the community. So it's important to remember that this is more than just a process or a plan. It's about human beings with a full set of emotions to manage. It's about people who are staying in the organization when that person leaves. And even if a leader is looking forward to retirement, for example, leaving an organization that they've dedicated many years of their life to, it can bring joy to move on to the next chapter, but it's also a sense of loss that needs to be acknowledged, and that person needs to be supported in the process. So I think it's very important that we remember as we go on today, we're talking about plans and process and policies. There are real people behind this, and they need care in this process as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl to take us through some of our next slides.
Thank you, Kelly. Well, I'm Cheryl Adelstein, and I'm happy to be with you this afternoon. And now that Kelly has helped us understand what succession planning is and why it's important, let's jump into the elements that together create a comprehensive framework that results in a leadership continuity or succession plan. So you can see here there's 5 elements: a shared understanding of succession, emergency planning, succession policies, talent development policies, strategic plan integration, and then inventories and documents that help with this whole process. And all of these things together create a succession plan framework. Over the next few minutes, Kelly and I will go through each of these elements, but there's a few things to note first. If you can complete all of these elements, that's ideal. Great. It's a great goal. But what's more important is that you get started, even if you're not going in a particular order. There's no reason, you don't have to go through this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You'll see as we go through this that if you were able to undertake 1 and 2 and start to build some of the inventories, you'll have a solid beginning to keep working on over time. Everyone's plan and process will look just a little different, and that's okay. The key is just getting started. So let's go through the first element, a shared understanding of succession, which is conversations about supporting the people who advance the cause. As Kelly mentioned a few moments ago, this can be touchy. The goal of succession planning is to introduce and maintain a culture of succession within your organization created by a pipeline of developed talent. You need to get everyone on the same page to understand that it is important to move forward. So you start with your board of directors and executive team, and then expand to senior leaders to start having these conversations. So developing a shared understanding requires talking about some challenging things. What will we do if a sudden leadership vacancy occurred? How much time should we spend on the subject of developing people? What do we mean by transition and succession? What's the reputation of our organization as a place to work and volunteer? These conversations will add momentum for moving forward and taking actions to build your succession plan. When you do it, where do you have these conversations? Well, specific planning meetings and board retreats to start, somewhere where you can really focus on these things. And you also have to ask, are you ready to have these conversations? Do you have some of the required elements in place? As Kelly mentioned, these conversations focus on some difficult issues. Power, who has it? How does it move through your organization? Politics, who needs to know? Circumstance, each organization is different, and expectations from the board, from the leadership, from the staff, and from the community. Also, it makes a difference if you have a large or small organization. Continuity planning is equally important in both types of organizations, but it may look very different in a 5 to 20 person organization than in a 20 or more person organization. So you may need to assess if your organization is ready for these conversations. And here are a few questions you can ask. Do we have a strategic plan we can draw on that discusses people policies? Do we have any type of emergency plan in place? Do we value and spend dollars on staff and board development? Are board policies in place, or are they in the bylaws that discuss term limits and leadership pipeline and board transition? Starting at the board exec level is key, but you also need to bring these conversations to a staff level as well. So I'm going to go into the next slide, which is emergency planning. That's the next element, which is a continuity of leadership for when life happens. Sometimes the shared understanding phase can seem abstract, and it often helps to focus on something more concrete. Element 2, emergency planning, is where organizations enter the succession planning conversation because they have not thought about it in advance and find themselves in need when a leader unexpectedly leaves. There are tools you can use to assist with emergency planning. So starting up here, what happens when a board chair unexpectedly resigns, or in any given year, 6 or more board members roll off? Do you have a board leadership pipeline to fill those vacancies? What happens when your executive director leaves? Is it different if they leave and give you 2 weeks or 4 weeks notice? If they are terminated, if they retire? Do you have a plan in place to deal with these scenarios? Have you considered interim management? These same questions apply with all senior level jobs, CFOs, CIOs, directors of development, directors of human resources. Have you thought about who steps in if any of these folks leave? Do you have a process in place to keep your agency running smoothly? And lastly, do you have all the critical information collected in one place? Agency inventory. I want to discuss with you the creation of an agency inventory. One of the first things you can do that will be an amazing gift for anyone newly filling a role is the agency information sheet. You may have had an experience of someone leaving and taking this information with them because it's only in their head, or saved in an obscure place and no one can find it. This is a tool that consolidates vital organizational information and provides a map to help you find things like passwords, the names of approved contract signers, insurance company information, audit due dates, bank accounts, vendor records, donor and membership information, etc. I recently took on an interim executive director role, and I would have loved to have had this document at my disposal. When I began my engagement, I brought this idea to a staff meeting, and it was very well received. We took the time to customize it for our organization. Unfortunately, 4 months in, I don't have this document complete, but I vow that it will be on the desk waiting for the permanent ED when they arrive. So I am going to do something a little tricky here. I'm going to stop sharing and share another document, and I hope it works. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. I am going to share. An example of an agency inventory. So we don't have time to go through this at any great level. This one happens to be in Excel. And you can see across the bottom the different categories: corporate, financial, legal, HR, facility, program, contracts, insurance, fundraising, IT, authorization. So corporate would be like having your IRS letter and your bylaws and your EIN someplace handy. Financial, your tax returns, your financial statements, your current board, previous year's board, your bank account information. HR, your employees' names and addresses, where the personnel records are kept, who your payroll company is. Facilities, if you have a lease, where is it? If you own a property, where's the deed? Who manages your building? Where's your security information? Depending on what kind of organizations you have, what kind of program information you might need to keep. Contracts, who are your major vendors or your major people who do your work for you, your IT people, your people who mow your lawn, the people who take care of different things in your buildings, your contract information. Your insurance providers, there's so many of them, and having all that information handy is useful. Fundraising, if you're an organization that counts on donors, who are your biggest donors and who holds that relationship? What if those relationships are held by the person that's leaving? Important to know that. IT, what are all your passwords? This is so critical. What if you can't get into all the documents and software that you need to be able to access? And authorizations, who are your signers? Who's authorized to sign things? So this is just an example of an agency inventory. I'm going to stop sharing and try again to share the PowerPoint. See how that goes. Great. So that's an example of an agency inventory. Now I'm going to take you through another tool. And with the agency inventory, you can maybe see how valuable this might be to a new leader in an organization in transition. In terms of this next tool, position vacancy strategies, one option for an emergency plan is to have other people take on additional responsibility on a temporary or short-term basis. This is where people development really comes into play. In order for someone to be ready to take on an added temporary responsibilities, first they need to want to do it, and then they need to be supported to continue to advance their skills. As part of an annual performance review, we want to discuss a person's potential and interest and make sure their job descriptions are up to date and accurately reflect what they do. Once you've identified those who have the ability or interest, if there is a need to put it in writing with an additional memo or an org chart that shows where the reporting structure would be if you had to deploy this plan and what specific responsibilities and duties that someone would be taking on. Remember, this is a collaborative effort, not something done in isolation. We do planning with people, not to them. So let me give you a specific situation to make this more clear. If your organization has an assistant director or a chief of staff, they would be getting annual reviews by the executive director, and the executive director should be talking to those folks about what are your plans? What would you like to do? If I ever were to leave, would you be interested in holding this position temporarily? What type of training and development do you feel like you need in order to be able to progress and to come into an interim position? And this would be the same with your chief development officer, your chief information officer, if they're working under them, talking with them about how if they're interested in growing and what kind of skills they would need. You might consider is bringing in a professional interim. As mentioned, I'm currently serving as an interim executive director. This is most applicable to an executive director, a C-suite, or other senior leadership roles. Interim management is a helpful next step to facilitate organizational alignment during a transition. So why bring in an interim? Experienced leadership on short notice, an objective resource from outside the organization to advance best practices, creating sufficient time to successfully hire a next leader, bringing in skills to meet unique transition needs, fostering a functional work culture, identifying and addressing immediate problems, and supporting the executive search process. Sometimes difficult things need to be done in an organization, and if an interim can solve some problems or put things on the right path, it paves the road for the next director. The last tool I want to highlight relates to board leadership and governance. The same succession planning questions apply to your board. Often these items are part of your bylaws. Are there term limits? Is there a career path to the board chair role? Is this in place in case a board chair needs to step down? Do you have committees with committee chairs as a way to develop leadership? Do you have a nominating process that brings future leaders on board? And are there non-board leadership opportunities in your organization to grow talent? These are things to consider to ensure board continuity. So I'm going to move from the tools to put some of these places in place to the next element, which is actually creating policies or a roadmap for navigating talent continuity and leadership succession. Now that you've had conversations and began the process and have started to identify options for leadership vacancies, all this work should be documented in written policies. We've talked about all the tools that can help with emergency planning, but now let's talk about setting policies to handle transitions before they happen. So here's an example of 4 different kinds of policies. An executive transition policy that lines out what to do if there's a short-term or permanent vacancy that needs to be filled, and if your organization will consider using a professional interim. Developing compensation policies. Is there a plan in place for compensation if an existing staff member is temporarily promoted to hold a vacant position? What about compensation for a professional interim? Do you have board governance policies? These are usually part of the bylaws, but sometimes you might have to make some additions. A review of your bylaws to ensure you have a leadership path and a plan for vacancy is a great idea. And lastly, staff development. Do you have a policy on staff development? How will your organization ensure that staff members have professional development and training to continue their personal growth and be prepared to step into a leadership position? As you develop policies, they should be approved by the board and reviewed and updated annually. While we could do a full webinar on the development of each of these policies, I do have the time to give you one example. In my current position as an interim, part of my scope of services is to manage the hiring process for the next ED. It has raised a variety of questions with the board. Who will be on the search committee? How will the decisions be made? And who decides? Using a template and meshing it with the current bylaws, we crafted a policy that included short and long-term absences. So what if the ED is gone because they need to go have surgery or want to take a 3-month sabbatical, or a permanent change to the ED position due to resignation or retirement or being terminated? So the plan defines if and when an interim will be brought in and who makes that decision. It defines who appoints the search committee and its makeup, and it further defines how the search is executed and the process for making the final decision. It took about 6 weeks to write this document and get it through the executive committee and the board, and now that it's adopted, it is a roadmap for moving forward, which I've been following to guide the search. This current slide shows the elements that you could include in a chief executive succession policy, which is an annual succession policy and making sure that it gets approved every year. Who are the signatories? What does the organization chart look like? a job description, a copy of the policy, and the agency inventory. And all these pieces put together could be your chief succession policy. I'm now going to turn this back over to Kelly to discuss the last two pillars in the succession planning framework.
Thanks, Cheryl. So the fourth element is to address talent development. An organization's success depends on its people, period. So it can be helpful to ask the question in your organization, how does our focus on fundraising compare to our focus on people raising? Because we all think a lot about fundraising in the nonprofit sector. We put a lot of energy there and we have a lot of plans and actions that we take in that realm. When we're talking about succession planning and leadership continuity, we really need to think about people raising, talent development. So a couple different ways to look at this. The first is thinking about what keeps people coming back to work every day. So as you look at these, fair pay for talent, a team atmosphere, a welcoming, safe, and happy work environment, opportunities to learn and grow, trusted leadership that's respected and admired, and a personal connection to meaningful work. You'll notice that 5 of these 6 are not related to pay or dollars, right? They do take time, energy, and focus, but they go beyond the paycheck to what is important given how tight nonprofit budgets usually are. I think that's really important. So cultivating a culture where people feel like they have a place, they're part of a team, they can grow and contribute, that's essential for retention. Giving people opportunities to learn and grow. If you could stay on that other one for a minute, Cheryl, thanks. Giving people opportunities to learn and grow. So many years ago, I worked in a nonprofit organization where I was part of a firsthand example of this. I was given stretch opportunities that allowed me to push my learning edge and grow my executive skills, and allowed me to be in rooms with groups of people and leaders that I hadn't worked with before. It was really at the edge of my comfort zone at that time, but that is where the growth happened for me. And it does for a lot of people at the edge of that comfort zone. So equally important through that was that I had an executive director who then discussed those opportunities with me and coached me one-on-one. This kind of thing really helped me to grow up quickly and develop leadership skills and confidence that I didn't have at that time. And it also deepened my commitment to the organization. They were investing in me. I really felt invested in them. So it was definitely a two-way street. So that's just an example of one of the ways that you can retain talent, grow talent, and have that talent available for a future leadership need. And overall, these 6 are just some of the people-focused ways that you can retain staff. So on the next slide, this one focuses a little bit more on the operational and administrative things that help people feel supported and know that the organization is grounded in practices that support a healthy workplace. Some of these we don't actually think about until something happens, or many staff don't think about until something happens. We don't need a conflict resolution policy or a whistleblower protections on a daily basis, but we absolutely need them for if something does happen. There is a level of trust that comes with knowing that these things are available if staff have a need to use them. We've talked about the impact of training and education. This is going to look different in each organization. One common model that you've probably already heard about is the 70-20-10 model. So 70% of the training is education on the job. The example I just gave was a good one of being provided opportunities to advance my skill set. 20% is coaching and mentoring. And if you can pair those coaching and mentoring with the on-the-job training, that's ideal. And then 10% is a formal classroom style learning. This might be something that you pay for. It's a local conference. It's an online webinar. It's something like that. So be creative here in a way that fits with your budget, and don't think about training and education as one type of thing only that has to have a dollar amount attached to it. Annual performance reviews and job descriptions, make sure these are accurate and up to date. This provides a level of transparency and consistency, and everyone should know what's expected of them. And also, if you're interested in other positions, being able to look and see what's involved in those positions and say, I'd like to learn this skill because I'm interested in growing in this area or moving into a different position or leadership position. So when performance reviews are done well, they're a great opportunity for this bi-directional communication and planning, referring back to your job description to know what's expected of you, very important. Another example, equitable hiring process. This is the first impression that people have of your organization. Right away, they're going to be able to ascertain whether the process is fair, whether they were treated respectfully, were they given an opportunity to showcase their unique talents that they want to bring to you. So all of these factors add to a positive employee experience that supports retention. Element number 5, strategic planning initiatives. Why are we talking about strategic planning right now? Well, because, next slide, Cheryl, if it's not in your strategic plan, it's much less likely to happen. This is where the organization's highest priorities are spelled out. So if your strategic plan talks about the leadership continuity, the succession planning activities that you're doing, that's where it needs to be to demonstrate its importance. So strategic plans often have a heavy focus on programs or the ultimate service that's being provided to the community, which is great. It needs to be there. I have a client right now that I'm working with on updating their strategic plan. It's a pretty strong organization. It's been around for 30 years, but I was actually a little surprised to see that there's absolutely nothing in their current strategic plan about people. So my question to them was, who does the work? How does your mission get deployed with the community and in collaboration with the community? What are you doing to attract and retain people so you can meet your mission over the long term? So a well thought through and comprehensive strategic plan must look at both the financial resources and the people resources that are needed to provide your services and fulfill your mission. Next question or slide, Cheryl. So here are some questions to ask if you're going to be creating or updating a strategic plan. What is the amount that you allocate for talent development? Ideally, it's between 1% and 2% of your total budget. So if you have $1 million budget, that's $10,000 to $20,000. That doesn't seem like much. That might be $1,000 to $2,000 if you have a staff of 10 to 20. But if you consider spending that money is only one way to develop people, like we talked about before, the 70-20-10 approach, then the 1% to 2% becomes more robust if you're combining it with that on-the-job training, with that coaching and mentoring and that type of thing. So think about, you need to have some dollar amount in your strategic plan. It needs to talk about people retention and training, but it doesn't need to be all about the money. Are you setting clear goals and objectives related to people? This might be tracking professional development goals and how much professional development you provide to people. What are your retention rates? Are you retaining people at a high level? Do you have a lot of turnover every year? Another question, does the strategic plan identify the resources needed to perform the activities or provide services? So as you go through each goal and objective, does it talk about the staff you need to fulfill that, the level of knowledge and expertise that you need, the leadership needed to make that work actually happen? So strategic plans connect the what, the how, and the who. Next slide. So we went really fast through those 5 elements, but together these elements create a comprehensive framework that results in a succession plan focused on leadership continuity. This is relevant to big agencies and small agencies, startups, and those that are decades old. And as Cheryl mentioned in the beginning, you can start anywhere, but we encourage you just to get started because it can take time. This isn't something that you're going to do and have done next month, because it involves a lot of people and a lot of input. But if you get started with the inventory, right, do that. That's excellent information to have, even if you're not going through a transition of any particular position. Make sure that you are on the same page. You have a shared understanding of what succession is as it compares to transition and career development. Number 2, emergency plan. That's often where people come to the table with transition planning and succession planning. They have an emergency. Start there. Be prepared for your emergency. Use those agreements to put in place your policies, get them approved by your board, and then you need to be working on your talent development practices and make sure it's in your strategic plan. So we're going to have time for questions next, but I have 2 action items for everyone on this webinar after you get off today. First one, talk about this session with your colleagues in your organization and with other organizations. Start building the knowledge and momentum about why this is so important to your organization, to the community of nonprofits in your area, why it matters to have leadership. And second, just consider how you can get started. What's important, most important for your agency right now, and start there. So that's my call to action for you. I think, Cheryl, we're moving to questions next. Cheryl and Evan, maybe you can tell us what we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So we do have our first question here in the chat. So what if you do have a plan in place and you've developed the plan with your staff and board, but the staff involved in the plan or named in the plan are not interested in sort of being in line for succession?
Mm-hmm. Do you want to?
Oh, Cheryl, you're on mute.
Cheryl, you're on mute.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And that means that the plan was put in place without the input of the people who you were thinking about, right? So it has to be an iterative process, and there has to be conversations. So, and you will end up kind of holding your hands up if you decided Sally should be the interim CFO and no one ever talked to Sally about doing that over the past 3 years while she was developing her skills at the organization. So I would say that to answer that question, that probably shouldn't have been in the plan until the folks were talked about to first, but I would see if Kelly has anything she'd want to add.
I agree with that, Cheryl. As we mentioned, I think earlier in this webinar, it should include not just the board and not just the executive. This should be something that sort of permeates the culture so that people understand that there are these opportunities. And as Cheryl said, if they're not interested, that's not an effective succession plan. That person needs to have the knowledge of what could be next for them and what would happen in the event that someone left a senior role and they wanted to step into that. Oh, I'm sorry, I see the chat. The staff was involved in the process and agreed to be in the plan. Okay, so to that I would say this is a great reason why you have to routinely revisit your succession plan, because people's circumstances can change is one of the reasons. So if you develop sort of an annual review process, we often suggest that this become tied to your annual budget, because that's something that has to happen every year. So a little bit before the budget starts, renew these conversations with people. If they've changed their minds, circumstances have changed, seek out potential other staff who might be interested in that. And if there aren't other staff that are interested in that, that might be the place where you're going to have to begin developing ideas about what would you do to get someone from outside the agency. If you're talking about an executive director and not having anyone internal who wants to step into that, even on an interim basis, you can think about professional interim that Cheryl mentioned. This is usually something that lasts from like 3 to 9 months. It's someone to help shepherd the organization as you go through the process of finding the permanent executive, and that person can help solve problems. They're very good at assessment and analysis. They can sort of help calm the waters. They can be an excellent bridge from the prior leader to the next leader.
Yeah, thank you. Another question here. What would be some additional resources that people who are working on leadership continuity or succession planning might be able to use to help guide them?
Kelly, go ahead and then I'll add to it.
Sure. So in addition to the information inventory, there is a questionnaire that Cheryl and I both have that asks some key questions of your board to see if your board is ready. And why this is geared toward board is because a lot of people come to this conversation through the path of an executive transitioning, right? And it's the responsibility of a board to hire and manage an executive director. So if your board is understanding their role in succession planning, that's really important. So there's that tool that we have. Cheryl, what other tools can you think of off the top of your head?
Well, as Evan mentioned when he introduced us, both Kelly and I have been through a succession planning boot camp, and we're certified succession planners, which means that we're qualified to facilitate the conversations. One of the really beautiful things about succession or continuity planning is it's really very much an internal process. You can't hire a consultant and come in and say, do this for us. This is really about you all talking internally to get to the place, and sometimes having a facilitator to help guide those discussions can help. So that is one thing you could look at, is bringing in someone who can help facilitate these challenging conversations and move you to the next place. We're happy to share some additional tools. There's a lot of them online, but you want to be evaluating your organization to see if you're just doing good, if you're doing good management practices generally, if you're have good budget practices and good audit practices and good human resource practices. And there's a lot of tools out there for that as well.
Great. Well, I think that might be all the questions we have right now. But I want to thank you again, Kelly and Cheryl, for the presentation. And I want to remind everyone that today's program will be available on our Open Classroom page, and you can review it as well as over 200 past Open Classroom programs. I'll share a link to that in the chat. But otherwise, yeah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having
Thank you,
us.
everyone.